Well, hey, welcome back. I'm back here with Bob. Bob, you doing good, man?
I'm doing great.
Yeah.
Welcome back.
Welcome back. We're going to talk about Monday, Tuesday of this final week of Jesus, and really how this is just a continuation of Sunday, really. You know, last episode, Palm Sunday, Jesus is making his intentions known. He's coming public, like you said, in his ministry. He's letting people know, here's who I am. I'm the Messiah. You know, I'm coming, and which would have created a lot of stir, right?
And the powder keg environment that was in play yesterday is still there today, no less intense. He spent the night in Bethany. That's a couple of miles away, so it's not far. So he's walked back now with his disciples. It's Monday. He's entering the city again. Can you imagine how people are anticipating? Wow, based on what he said yesterday, what's he going to say today?
Yeah.
And so there's great anticipation. The religious authorities are the same way. Look what he said yesterday. How much worse is it going to be today in their minds? And just a lot of intensity that's rising. And he's continuing really the same themes in his thinking.
Yeah.
Making the ministry public, really establishing what kind of king am I going to be?
That's right.
But also the judgment that's coming to Israel because of their failure to bear fruit in God's kingdom. That's also another one of those themes that's at work, and we're going to really see that today on Monday, especially with the cursing of the fig tree.
Yeah, because there's so much symbolism packed into this, you know, and there's so much that sometimes, again, we miss of what's happening behind the scenes, you know, and Jesus announced his who he was, why he was coming, you know, with Palm Sunday, but now he's up in the ante a little bit, you know, and we call it, I think it's kind of a fun thing, you know, that, you know, he's talking smack, but he's up in the ante, because you said in this people sense, there's a lot of anticipation because they think he's coming to overthrow in that day and time. And so he's got the attention of the people. And you know, it's like when a movie star comes through or a sports star comes through, the crowds gather in anticipation to see him. So the crowds are ready. They're ripe to see what Jesus is going to do. And so he's got, when we talk about some of these things, especially when we get to like the temple and we talk about Pharisees and Sadducees, they've got the ear of a lot of people. And Jesus is going to come into this week, you know, Monday and all that, and he is going to really begin to challenge not only the nation of Israel, but he's going to begin to challenge the leaders with the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and really try to discredit them. And it's a really incredible scene that you got.
And everything that's happening this week has an immediate effect, obviously, but it also has far-reaching effects too, because it's talking about what's happening, you know, in the course of that week to accomplish God's purpose in salvation through Jesus' death and resurrection. But everything, the cursing of the fig tree, all of that has future implications as well.
That's right.
Not only for Israel and their history, but also for the kingdom of God and that linear goal that God has for history.
That's right.
All that's playing out in the course of this week, especially today on Monday.
Yeah, absolutely. So why don't we take it like this? Why don't we maybe break it down a little bit? We'll do fig tree, and then we'll do cleansing. And because we want to talk about some questions and what's kind of happening there as well between Jesus and the Pharisees and Sadducees. But why don't we just kind of take each of these events and look at them, right? Look at them, zoom in a little bit, zoom out a little bit, broader perspective. What's Jesus trying to say? What is he doing? And then we'll kind of move on to temple cleansing. You like that? You like that idea?
I like it.
All right. So, you know, there's a lot of stuff, you know, when Jesus is talking about the fig tree, a lot of symbolism there and a lot of questions around what is Jesus really talking about? and what, because the disciples are missing it, right? They're not getting it.
No. They're still thinking more like the crowd, like, wow, we're finally getting our due after we've been put down and the religious authorities have been against us the whole time, and Jesus has been trying to tamp down our excitement because it's not time to show that yet.
That's
but
right.
now it's happening. And so they're more thinking like the crowd. But let's keep in mind, as Jesus enters Jerusalem on that morning of Monday, he is dead set on the temple.
Yeah.
That's where he's going.
Yes.
He's going back there because he'd been there on Sunday. He's going back there on Monday. And on the way, he passes the fig tree. And he curses that fig tree. Why? Because it is not bearing fruit.
That's right.
There's nothing on it. It just looks good. What a symbol of what Israel has become. The religious leaders have become. They're all the pomp and circumstance. But there's no heart in what they're doing. They're missing it. God's moving in other ways.
Yeah.
They're denying that. They're going the opposite way that God is. And in comes Jesus to confront that and put a stop to that, and in essence bring judgment to that, and all that symbolized in what's happening with the cursing of the fig tree.
Yeah.
And then the disciples, they asked the question. That's good. They asked the question so that now Jesus explains it a little bit more, helps them understand this is the purpose in it, but it's also the purpose in my coming.
That's right.
And so again, there's the immediate cursing of a fig tree that's not fruitful, and let's get rid of that one and let something else grow there that will bear fruit, and how that is prophesying what's going to happen in the course of this week and for the future of the kingdom of God.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. It reminds me of whitewashed tombs, where Jesus talks about whitewashed tombs. They're beautiful on the outside, but dead. It's dead, right? And this idea of you walk by the fig tree, but it's not producing fruit. And you think about, you go to Jerusalem, right? And you see that, and then you bring it back and say, all right, so what with the fig tree? Well, what are we supposed to be doing? Producing fruit. We're supposed to be bearing fruit, right? We're supposed to be fruitful in our walk with Christ. We're supposed to be fruitful in our expression of the kingdom and God's kingdom. I like to say taking kingdom values with us. We're supposed to be fruitful in sharing the gospel, fruitful in making disciples. And it's kind of it's in the same way that it's an indictment that Jesus is pointing this out to say, this is just not bearing fruit. It's not fulfilling its purpose, using the fig tree to talk about the nation of Israel. And I think you can bring it back to us personally. You can bring it back to the church corporately and say that there's so many times where we're not bearing fruit either. We're no better, no different than that fig tree or the nation of Israel back then. And it should be an indictment to us as well today.
That's the clear challenge for us today in what Jesus is doing.
Yeah.
I want you to put yourself in Jesus' skin for a minute, if I can put it that way. Now, it's on Monday. He's coming into Jerusalem. He's cursing the fig trees, going toward the temple. We'll talk about that in a minute. But imagine what he's going through, because remember the sovereignty of God. He knows everything. He knows what's coming in terms of the judgment of God upon Jerusalem, their destruction, the temple's leveling destruction that's going to happen in just a few short decades, in 70 AD or somewhere along in there.
Yeah, 70 AD.
He knows that, and how he must feel knowing, he's not enjoying the cursing of the fig tree. No. He's not enjoying that. And so just understand the feeling of remorse and of sadness and grief that's going on, because he feels, and we see this in the way he cries, he weeps over Jerusalem.
That's right.
As he enters the city, because that panoramic view as he looks at Jerusalem, and all of a sudden he feels the weight of what's coming.
That's right.
The judgment, and it breaks his heart. He's not in a sense of they're getting what they deserve, it's about time.
That's right.
He's not thinking that. He's grieving over their failure. And I think Jesus has that same feeling of us when we don't bear fruit.
Yeah.
And it does grieve him. And it's important for us to understand that. But when we have a spirit of repentance, which is what he hoped they would have, but they didn't have. All right, let's be different. Let's have a spirit of repentance when we recognize I'm not bearing fruit. I need to change.
Yeah.
And I need to step out and do more. And that's the difference in us and them that can bring a smile to Jesus' face or a sense of satisfaction to him rather than more grief.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really, again, one of those, Jerusalem to now, the idea of he weeps, and not, they're going to get what they deserve. Because I think that's how we a lot of times frame Jesus, right? We mess up. You're going to get what you deserve. He's going to punish us, right? He's going to do that. I like how you brought that in though, because you really see God's heart, a heart that weeps when there's not bearing fruit, a heart that wants there to be fruit, a heart that wants that. And I think that's a really great way to look at Jesus and maybe how he looks at us in those moments when we don't bear fruit. It grieves his heart.
As we relive that week, it's just so important for us to understand how he felt and what he was going through, and that's not just it's not just a feeling of then, it's now too.
Yeah.
And this is how he looks at us and feels toward us.
That's right.
That same compassion that he had for Jerusalem, he has for us.
Yeah. Yeah. I have this note here that I wanted to make sure we talked about when it pertains to this, and how Jesus takes the opportunity to instruct his followers to really trust God in this moment, and how that's going to work its way out throughout the week, because there's going to be a massive amount or a need to trust God, because there's going to come a point in this week where the guy that all these people have been following, he's going to be presumed dead. And I think it's really instructive for us too, of this encouragement to always put our trust and faith in God. Kind of what we said in the last episode, right? He's always in control. But it's interesting in the process of this conversation that he's having and all of this, that he really instructs, hey, trust him. Trust the Lord. Trust the Lord.
And as the events play out, it's important for us to learn what God's purpose in doing that. But it's just also so important for us to understand how he felt, what he's doing, what God's bigger agenda is beyond just that day. And he is trying to teach us as he taught his disciples. And he wants us to bear fruit. He wants us to have that spirit of repentance.
Yes.
That he so is in grief now because Jerusalem and the religious leaders do not have.
Yeah.
One of the things we can learn from it.
Yeah, he wants us to walk the walk and not just talk the talk. He doesn't want us to look the part but not be the part.
Yes.
He wants us to bear fruit.
And as the day continues and he moves past that, remember he's dead set on going to the temple. That's his focus.
Yeah.
That's where he will meet these religious authorities again. That's where he's going to meet the people again, and they're going to listen to his teaching. And boy, when he gets there, he's going to wreak havoc.
Yeah, he's going to wreak havoc. And that's really what you see him doing in the first part of the week. He's like intentionally doing some of these things, saying these things, using these illustrations to really wreak havoc. And it's almost, when we talk, if we were to string last episode to this one, and we talk about the plan of God, the sovereignty of God, it's almost like Jesus just continues to push the buttons, continues to wreak havoc, to basically leave them no other choice but to arrive at the conclusion that happens, the betrayal and the death.
He's got to die.
Yeah.
In their minds.
But in his mind too, right?
Yes, but for different reasons.
But for different reasons.
Yeah.
Right? Which is interesting. He's got to die. In his mind and in their mind.
Oh, yeah, that is so significant in God's purposes and in his economy. there's got to be death for the penalty of sins.
Yeah.
And Jesus is going to pay that. He knows that. But in the minds of the religious leaders is, we just got to get rid of him, and it's not enough to run him out of town.
That's
we
right.
don't want to just run him away. He's got to die.
Yeah.
He deserves that. We're going to it's punitive. We're going to punish him by killing him.
That's right.
Which is one of the things that makes that cleansing of the temple to us seem like, now I'm just so glad to see him just look like he's got some authority.
Yes.
And he takes the whip or whatever he got and really runs out the money changers. And but again, let's remember that in his mind, first of all, he's not losing his temper.
Mm-hmm.
It's righteous feeling of righteous indignation.
Yeah.
And he is right to be feeling that way.
Mm-hmm.
And so let's just remember, he's not all of a sudden gotten so mad that I'm just going to take out my anger on people. He doesn't lose control, lose his temper. He's in control of that. It's righteous indignation.
Mm-hmm.
And he's bringing judgment that is immediate upon the way that the temple has just become a mercantile place. And he reminds them, it is my Father's house.
Yeah.
It's a house of prayer. But they've not made it that. And so this is where the judgment's coming in.
Yes.
This is what's on his mind.
Yes.
Not just whipping my enemies, not just I'm going to finally get some victory in this. But it's that sense of judgment for what has deteriorated. There's no longer the atmosphere of worship.
That's right.
But again, it's just a place to sell and to make sure you've got the right kind of animals to sacrifice, which I have. I'll sell them to you. And it's just become a place of economy.
Yeah.
I read one source this week that also talked about how the temple had become a thoroughfare for people just walking and taking shortcuts. And so if you can picture this, in Jesus' mind, my Father's house, a house of prayer, and all of a sudden it's just a money-changing place. It's a loud place. Coins are rattling. Animals are bleeding all over the place. People are walking back and forth, going here and there. They're not coming to worship. They're just passing through.
Yeah.
All of this is taking place as Jesus comes in and says, it's got to stop.
That's right.
It's time to stop.
Yeah.
And that's what's happening.
Yeah.
And again, just as we bring that today, let's think about how we enter the house of God. Are we thinking about something else? I mean, there are a lot of things on our minds as we come to church. I mean, that's okay. But do we come with a spirit of worship?
That's right.
And enter that place as a place of prayer as we come to worship God.
That's right.
So just a lot of implications for us every day.
That's right.
Well, how we approach God.
Yeah, and you think about it. So Fig Tree he's kind of casting judgment on Israel. As he moves into the temple, he focuses the judgment on the leaders of the temple, which are the Pharisees and the Sadducees and all that. He's challenging their authority. He's challenging their leadership. He's challenging their heart, because in a sense he's saying, you've allowed it to come this way. You've not kept it the way that it's supposed to be. You've allowed it to become loud and a thoroughfare and a place to exchange, and you've not allowed it to stay a house of worship. So it's interesting, the progression that you see. He's challenging the whole nation of Israel and how it's not bearing fruit. And now he's going to move in and he's going to challenge its religious leaders, right? Which is going to create a whole nother set of issues for him.
Oh boy, it is. And this is where we need to kind of keep in mind, we're talking about kind of a Monday, Tuesday.
Yeah.
And we don't know exactly like where Monday stops, Tuesday starts, but in the course of those 2 days, it's still the focus on the temple. He's coming into the temple because that's where he meets the people. That's where he confronts the failure of the religious leaders and really the larger Jerusalem, state of Israel. Mm-hmm. And that's when a series of questions begin to arise that that seem to focus, these are intentional questions to put him down by the religious leaders.
That's right.
And yet Jesus is so cool in the sense that he knows the heart of the questions is wrong. And where they're intending to trap him,
Yes.
how he comes back with each question. But if you can picture an intensifying environment of every question leads to a more difficult next question, a more challenging, a more intimidating next question. And so this series of questions is just, again, ramping up the sense of gut wrench and tightening of the stomach muscles.
Yeah.
That's what's happening throughout this series of questions. Things are just getting worse in terms of the spirit of intimidation and their intention on trapping him.
Yeah.
And the squeeze is getting worse as this series goes on.
Yeah, you know, my mind, I think, I don't know if this is how it really was, but I think here's the crowd surrounding them. Here's Jesus on one side. Here's the Pharisees on one side. And, you know, it's like you go to a tennis match. You know, the serve, your head goes this way. Then the return, the head goes this way. I'm thinking, you know, but then you have gasps. Oh, you know, that's how I picture it. You know, that's
good.
There's this built of anticipation, even in the crowd, of like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? Because they're both trying, I think, to do the same thing, right? They're both trying to discredit the other in the eyes of the people, right? Because there's a crowd there. I mean, they're following Jesus. They want to know what's he going to do. They're so intrigued. I mean, and you know, but I think the first question really gets to the heart of where the Pharisees are coming from, and they ask him by what authority are you doing these things, or who gave you this authority?
And they've been waiting to ask that question a long time.
Yes.
It started on Sunday with all he's doing in their minds. They're thinking, we can get him by questioning his authority.
That's right.
And he's got no business doing this. And so when they asked that question on Monday, boy, that's been building up for at least 24 hours and more than that.
Yeah.
And again, that just gets it started. And,
yeah. Well, I mean, and the thing is that, you know, they had already asked Jesus to, when he came in on Palm Sunday, the crowd began to say, oh, here's the Messiah. You know, and they had already asked him to tell them no. You know, the Pharisees had already said to Jesus, can you just quiet this down a little bit?
Yeah.
Can you calm them down a little bit? You know,
and
he wouldn't do it. So already, when you think about the idea of authority, here you have a very authoritative group has asked this man to do something, and he's already defied them once, right? Now he continues to do these things, and now there's, all right, so, you know, whose authority, in which we know that there's no answer he could give that would satisfy them. I mean, with what he did on Palm Sunday, basically cemented the idea that his week was not going to end well.
And it's not a question that just popped up all of a sudden. We've already mentioned how they've been waiting to ask this, but their intention is to trap him because they want to get him to discredit himself in front of the people. Yeah. If he gives the wrong answer, but he also they want him to discredit himself in terms of the Roman government. Now, even though Caesar's not there at this moment, and Pilate's not there at this moment, the soldiers are. There are Roman authorities listening to this on the sidelines. Yeah. And the religious leaders know this. It's one more way they can trap him, and so there's just a lot of trappings all through this. Yeah, there is. On different layers of that one question. That's right. Well, and he asked them the question, right? Was the baptism of John from heaven or from man? So Jesus it's punch, counterpunch, right? Responds to their question with a question, which they can't answer, which then sparks a series of parables. And I'm just going to use this real quick to look at it. You know, you have the parable of the two sons in Matthew 21, where he's really coming right at the religious authorities for not believing in John's message. Then you have the parable of the tenants, which you can find in Matthew 21, Mark. You've got Luke. And, you know, Jesus
is winning the support of the people because he's exposing the Pharisees and the Sadducees for who they are. And when you look at the parable of the tenants, your vine owner is God, the vineyard is Israel, the slaves are God's prophets, right? And in the parable, the son is Jesus, the destruction of the evil tenants is God's judgment on Israel, and then the giving of the vineyard to others is the extension of God's kingdom to the Gentiles. So he's intentionally coming in and challenging the authority of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. And in doing this, again, this idea of revolution, right? This idea of overthrow. He's winning the people's hearts, right? And the people are, oh, here we go.
And that parable of the tenants is so significant because that's where he explains it more in detail. And so he's revealing in more detail the failure of the religious leaders and the religious system.
That's right.
That they've created in the temple. And so it seems like in that parable particularly, and they know he's talking about them, and the people are like, they're glad to hear this, because even though they've been going along with it, there's this sense of tension even in the people toward the religious authorities.
That's right.
And all of a sudden now Jesus is kind of putting them in their place, so to speak. And boy, this just, if anything, sets them to, we're going to kill him now. No way around it. It's that, I just think that parable in particular, because it exposes them for the sin of them trying to really control everything and kill the Son and take away from the Father and what he's doing and what his purpose is overall. And when the Father and when the Master comes in and destroys those tenants, it's gotta be a recognition to them of he has just called us out.
Yeah, he's called us out. Well, and again, in respect to the entire week, I think a lot of times in the church we focus on Palm Sunday, the upper room, the crucifixion, and the resurrection. And what's so interesting about this day in the temple is that this is a good foundation for the remainder of the week. It puts all the players on the stage in the right spots. Jesus is coming in, right? And his goals, his motives, his intentions are extremely clear by this point, right? And this is this is Jesus the King has come for his kingdom, and he's issued the challenge to the people who have been in control, right? And so this is a significant moment that sets up the rest of the week. And I think a lot of times we don't think about that with the fig tree and the temple.
And one of the things happening throughout this, keep in mind the sovereign control of God.
Sovereign control of God, yeah.
And when Jesus gives, and we don't have time to get into all these series of questions but as you read them, it's like Jesus wins every one.
Yeah.
But keep in mind, he's not just trying to say, I got you. He's not trying to do that.
Yeah.
He's trying to make the point that the Father, his judgment is coming, and he's bringing redemption to his people.
That's right.
And so that sense of clarifying the truth of Scripture in his answers to the questions, but also the nature of God, the failure of Israel, his love for the people, and the purpose of Jesus coming. All of that's coming out in this series of questions.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible.
And so at the end of that Monday and Tuesday events, there is greater clarity on why he's coming, where he's going, what the Father's intentions are, even though there's a lot that's going to happen after that's going to take them by surprise.
That's right.
But just like us, we learn it more as we look back on it.
Yeah.
And obviously they did too.
One of the things with the questions that I think is pretty cool to see is, they're asking Jesus gotcha questions. And anytime somebody asks us a gotcha question, we know that there's some deeper motives, right? That it's not just about us answering the question. There's something deeper going on. And what I think you see in the temple is the beginnings of the depth of the manipulation and the coercion, if you will, that the Pharisees will go to kind of get Jesus, right? And so you're beginning. It's almost like they've absorbed Sunday a little bit. They've absorbed Monday a little bit. They've asked Jesus, "Hey, would you denounce this?" And, no, I'm not going to do it. But now they're like, all right, now we got to start turning the tide here, and we've got to do something. So I just think that's interesting in the questions. You begin to see the manipulation coming through in the Pharisees questioning and their actions, which we know will even grow even greater as the week goes on, leading into his crucifixion. Yeah.
Well, the manipulation that's going on in these questions, I love the way you put it, like these questions are kind of gotcha questions.
Yeah.
And we can look at them that way because every response that Jesus gives, he could say, "I got you." If you read it, he could say that, but that's not his heart. That's not his purpose. See in this day's events the sovereignty of God working. Jesus is accomplishing his purpose.
Yeah.
He's making more clear what his kingdom purposes are.
That's
He's
right.
not just trying to defeat the religious leaders. He's trying to clarify what God is up to.
That's right.
It's going to bring his suffering for the sins of the world more into focus. And that's going to be his victory. Mm-hmm. But again, it appears at this point like that, Satan is getting his way.
Yeah.
But Jesus, even though that's a difficult time for him, he's got to begin to feel some peace that my purpose is getting accomplished. And even in the defeat of the religious leaders with a series of questions that day, it's more clarifying what his kingdom's about.
Yeah.
And it displays that God is in control of what's happening that week.
Yeah.
As difficult as it looks.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. It's quite a fascinating couple of days. And again, even though I think a lot of times we gloss over it, right? And if you're tracking through through Holy Week, and you're reading the scriptures that go along with each day, I certainly hope that this podcast brings a little bit more depth to that this is not something just to gloss over, but this is really setting the stage of Jesus' intentions, the Pharisees' intentions, and that now things are going to begin to get in motion to lead to the betrayal, arrest, and the death of Christ, which of course, we have the resurrection too, but some interesting days ahead for sure, and excited about those. And
all that Jesus is going through is helping me as I live with my difficulties each day too.
Yeah, that's right. That's good. It's good. Well, thanks so much for checking us out here on week 2 of the final week of Jesus. We'd love for you to subscribe, like, share the episode, and for anybody that you may think would be impactful for. And we'll see you next time. God bless you.